So
Thanks, guys.
yeah, definitely.
Hey, Aziz from PSFK. So one of the things that's really interesting that you pointed out is how, this research that we can gather, because advertising also doubles as a research tool now, right? So, and earlier you were talking about kind of extracting insights from purely quantitative data. I'm wondering, what is the role of qualitative research today? What is the role of qualitative research at the companies that you guys work for, have been exposed to? And specifically, there's kind of like this traditional qualitative research model where you're putting focus groups together, or it's more experiential, immersive research, and then there's the more like web savvy stuff where you're doing trend spotting using RSS feeds, social media, stuff like that. So I mean, just the question of the role of qualitative research when, maybe even more particularly, could qualitative research help that curve come forward, so that we need to collect less data because we already have these kind of hints and hypotheses that we've gathered from qualitative research, so we don't really need that much data to be collected in order to get the insights. So how would you guys respond to those thoughts?
Yeah, I guess, Jonah, because you've actually seen that whole arc, right? Doing it at Media Lab and then elsewhere, and then as a company.
Yeah, I mean, I think qualitative research and gut feelings and having hunches and all of that is really important. And even what I presented today about what works on Facebook or Twitter or Google comes partly from noticing like what kind of content seems to be doing well, which is looking at real data, but then trying to understand, well, what does that mean and why does that exist? There's nothing in the data that says people on Facebook don't post certain types of content because they care more about what their friends think than, even though they actually are interested in this content. That was like a extra level of analysis on top of it that was essentially qualitative. And we do that kind of work all the time. And I think having smart people looking at data and then coming up with theories and analyzing it and then saying, that theory I could test to see whether it's true, and then they do some data, do some other, that sort of back and forth, that loop between like having an idea and an insight, testing the data, experimenting with data, and sometimes you can't rigorously measure things. Sometimes you just need to like push ahead because the time it would take to rigorously measure would make it moot anyway. So I don't know. I think combining data analysis with real data and our insights is like really a key to doing the best work.
Yeah, although I think there is, certainly the quals are still in the game, right? There's actually this big battle, I think, that's starting to emerge in a lot of the discussion around like viral growth, right? Because there's sort of billiard ball people and then non-billiard ball people, where the billiard balls are like basically, if we set up the right platform, then it will become viral, right? The actual specific nature of the content doesn't matter all that much. And then there's kind of the reverse, right? And I think it's actually kind of this battle around the quality issue in some ways as well.
Yeah, and you see things like Plaxo, which was viral, but everyone hated it. So like if you don't have I feel like the best companies are ones where they are metric obsessed, but then they also stand for something even when the metrics conflict with it. And you see that with Facebook's, having a certain view about people being connected and being their true selves, and that they will stand for even when the data conflicts with that in some cases, but also being obsessed with figuring out how to grow. So I think, and you see, with media companies, you see a lot of times where they'll feature a really important story on their front page that isn't getting that much traffic, but it's an important story and it's educating the public. So I think you have to believe in something and have that goes beyond just the craven chasing of metrics.
Cool.
Hey guys, thanks a lot. Alex from Motherboard. Tim, if and this is a question for both of you guys, if we're talking about an ecology of the web, I love that analogy. What would sustainability look like in this context? And in the context of respecting the internet and acknowledging the human and the audience side of things. Here it looks like creepiness is pollution. And let's pretend it's like CO2. And I guess the difference with this kind of pollution and actual pollution is that once you cross that red line, with like CO2, you possibly hit a point of no return, at which point global warming or the greenhouse effect happens faster and faster. But it seems like that people's standards on the internet are shifting, and that the threshold can move. And then on this graph, there's this chance of eliminating the creepiness, eliminating the pollution. What does the pollution look like? What is this pollution? What is creepiness? Like, what makes it? And also, what would sustainability look like? And do companies now have a responsibility in some ways to start thinking about social, ecological, internet sustainability?
So obviously a lot of issues. I mean, my impression is, so I like the ecology metaphor because it actually brings in a bigger kind of like policy-related question, right? Which is, what kind of cultural universe do you want to live in online, right? Given that you can configure platforms in any which way you want, right? Like, what's the one that you want the most? And I guess the sense here, and there's this big debate in sort of in like environmental literature, right? Which is like, do we want to preserve the environment exactly as it is right now? Like, is that a good thing to do?
Yeah, like in a city, like, are you going to keep the city as it was, or are you going to...
Exactly, right. And so I think a lot of those kind of issues are implicated. My sense here when I talk about sustainability here is to kind of avoid sort of the boom bust that seems to follow advertising wherever it goes, right? The sense that advertising may have moved in, and at some point it's becoming invasive to the point where people feel they need to move on. I mean, there's a great value to that in terms of growth as well, but there's also a sense that people should feel comfortable, and also it should be a space where sharing occurs. And I guess one of the hopes here is once you pass the creepiness factor, the pollution is lack of participation. Right, like the kind of declining social life of a site. So I guess that would be my impression. I don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, not just to the data point, but I think that in general, when a medium is new, people who own that medium start making lots of rules about, like, well, this is the way blogs work, and blogs have this structure and that structure, and when we launched Huffington Post, I remember this very clearly, where there was like all this, celebrities didn't blog. It was for people in their pajamas, and it has to have this permanent structure, and it has to be this way and that way, and like the truth is that understanding those rules matter, but usually those early pioneers of any kind of field quickly become too rigid and forget the playfulness that made it cool in the beginning and the kind of Wild West factor, and there's new disruptions that push things in new directions. And so we could, in this conference, make a bunch of rules for like how you do marketing with internet culture, and how you use fair use and appropriation, and how you do, and all of those rules would be out of date in a few months or 6 months or however long, and the real sort of innovative stuff is going to mostly follow the rules but push in some new direction that hadn't been anticipated yet, and that's kind of when it's most exciting, and just kind of following the rules in a rote way is less exciting. So I think even with this data stuff, I guess I'm a kind of progressive in the sense that I think there's going to be a lot of new exciting things that are going to happen in the future, and you can't just like write down the rules now and kind of say, all right, now we're safe, we're not going to cause any pollution.
Right, because it's like you don't know if something's creepy until it's creepy, whereas you can tell that pollution is happening when it's happening. So it's like there's always this space, it seems, of experimentation.
Yeah, and there's things that people thought were creepy, and now they love it, and it's,
Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.